Here now to weigh in is journalist Andy Ngo, who was attacked by Antifa back in June. We certainly covered that as it happened. Andy, thank you for being here with us. We hope you're doing well in your recovery. We had a Democratic strategist on in the last hour of the show with Heather, and he said if the far-right group of protesters hadn't been there, Antifa wouldn't have been there. So in part, it's, I guess, both parties' fault. What do you say to that?
I disagree with his argument that if one side didn't show up, everything would have been fine. This is just a normalization of political violence. I don't think it's acceptable to be telling American citizens that because of your views, you're not allowed to demonstrate peacefully.
Andy, here's what the president is saying on this, on the Portland demonstration. Major consideration is being given to naming Antifa an organization of terror. Portland is being watched very closely. Hopefully the mayor will be able to properly do his job. Two-part question for you, sir. Will naming Antifa a terror organization eradicate this problem, and why hasn't it happened already?
Well, I think it can be helpful in bringing attention for federal and local authorities to take the ideology of Antifa more seriously. It seems like the DHS and FBI may not be doing that at the moment. However, in terms of labeling a domestic terrorist organization, I mean, there are questions about how that could be a slippery slope because the movement is somewhat nebulous, it's hard to define, its membership is anonymous. So we want to be careful about protecting civil rights as well. As in regards to why more hasn't been happening, I don't know, but I'm very thankful that President Trump is speaking out about Antifa's violence, because for so long it seems like people weren't really aware of what was happening in certain pockets of America. As we saw this weekend, I know the mayor described the event as peaceful, but I mean, his metric is basically looking to see if anybody was killed. Nobody was killed, but there were a lot of people who were injured, maced, beaten, mobbed. I mean, there were Antifa people who had come prepared with slabs of concrete, which they used to throw. Like, this is not, I mean, a lot of damage can happen before somebody's killed, and that should not be our standard.
Well, you mentioned some of the injuries that people can face in these situations. On Saturday, there were 13 arrests made at the Portland demonstration. That number certainly could have been larger, could have been far worse. But, Andy, do you think that this right-wing group, the Proud Boys, coming out and doing what they're doing, is that the answer?
I don't really have a judgment on the political views of groups that are coming in or in Portland in terms of, as long as they're demonstrating lawfully and peacefully, it's really none of my business what their views are. My issues is when people find it acceptable that in response to hearing or reading views that they dislike, the response they think that is justified is violence against these people. And, you know, milkshakes might seem innocent, but when you're having a mob of people who are throwing objects at people and blinding them, it marks them out to be targeted by everyone else. It happened to me. We're over 7 weeks now since I was beaten and robbed. There's been no arrest. And just over the weekend, there were only 13 or 14 arrests. There probably should have been 100, because some of these demonstrators, after the right-wingers already left, they just occupied the streets, and there was an injury that resulted from that with a bicyclist. So I don't see what happened as peaceful at all, and I see that if this was the best that our police could perform, there is some management issues there, and maybe it's coming from the police commissioner.
And you have stated, Andy, that a lot of what we're seeing right now with regard to Antifa is part of a leftist ideology that we see in universities. That is a subject that we can ask you about another time, because that can certainly fill up a 3 to 4 minute interview and a lot more than that. Andy Ngo, thank you so much for taking the time with us this morning.
My pleasure.